Okay, so now what I want to do is get a bunch of fruit and stuff to throw. So what we can do is go to this website here, fab.com. This is basically the old Unreal Engine marketplace. So you can just type here, fruit or something. And then we can come here to price and more filters and just click this. And there you go, a bunch of free assets. So I'm just gonna do that. I'm just gonna select a few and import it over Unreal. And just to show you guys how to import assets from Fab, we can come here in Unreal Engine and Window. There is this Fab option here. I believe you have to log in over here as well, but I'm already logged in. So, and basically you find whatever you had here in the browser. So say you want to download this Clementine here. So this is the link from the Clementine. You just copy this ID here after listings and you paste it here. And there you go. Now you just add to project. I think medium is fine. And there you go, it's been imported. My content browser just opened by itself here, and here is what it is. Fab, Megascans, Clementine. So everything that I'm going to use is going to end up here. And after I get them, I'll just move them somewhere else. I don't want to leave this folder here. And here's the mesh, by the way. It has already been prepared with the textures, materials, everything. So if I open this, there you go, you can see the asset right here, ready to use. Oh yeah, and of course, I can't forget to add this one. This is gonna be important. Okay, so I created this fruit folder over here. So I'm gonna select all of the assets that I got and move them all over here. And by the way, every time you move things from one folder to another in here in Unreal Engine, it's always good to come here into the root folder. You right click here and you click in this button here, update redirect your references. If you don't do this, eventually you'll end up with references for things in different folders all over the place, and it's just a huge mess, you know? So it's better to always do this, in my opinion anyway. Okay, so I want to start spawning this fruit just randomly over some time. So let's right click here and create a blueprint and make it an actor. I'll call it fruit spawning blueprint. Okay, so let's open this. This blueprint will define where things are spawned and when. So first, I'd like to define an area where things are going to be spawning. So I'm gonna add here a cube, and I'm gonna call this spawn area. And this is basically gonna define where the objects are gonna be spawning from, right? We'll set this to be hidden in game because you never wanna see this box during the animation. Also, we'll set the collision to be no collision. Also, it's kind of annoying to have this big white box like this. So you can go in here and change this material and type wireframe. It's on debug engine materials or engine debug materials. And I believe these are available by default. So you just click here and now you've got this, this wireframe is not so bright in your face, you know. Since this is gonna be invisible anyway, I just want this wireframe to know where to put it and like the correct size and everything. Okay, so now I need something to throw. So I'm going to create another blueprint, make it an actor blueprint, and just call it fruit. So here's our fruit blueprint. We just add a static mesh component here. Now I want the fruit to be able to collide with my model here. And my model, if I open the blueprint here, it's the object type custom animation collision, which is a custom collision type that I made for him and for some other objects that I want to interact. So we can go here in this fruit blueprint, click on static mesh and go to collision here. I want this collision presets here to be custom. I want the object type to be also animation collision, and I want them to ignore everything except custom animation collision here. So this fruit will only interact with this type of objects. Now I'm going to create a variable here. I'm going to call it mesh to use. I'm going to make it a static mesh. I'm going to make it instance editable and exposed on spawn. This exposed on spawn checkbox here allows the other blueprints to set this mesh to use before the begin play in here is called. So you can set the mesh before this actually spawns, which is very useful in this case because you want to set this mesh as a random mesh before it actually is created, right? Okay, so let's just make a simple test. We'll spawn here actor from class. We'll choose the class the fruit blueprint that we made, and then the mesh we just choose the orange for now, just to see what happens. We got a problem. What is this? Okay, so we didn't set the spawn transform, the location where this is going to be spawned. So for now, let's just get actor transform. but you get the position of this actor in the world and just plugged it in here just to see the spawning working. Okay, let's go here, find our blueprint and drag it over here. And if everything is working correctly, the fruit should spawn right here in the middle. So let's just play. And that didn't work. Let me find out why. Of course, I almost forgot. We have to set static mesh to change this static mesh with the mesh that we chose in the other blueprint, which is this mesh to use. So we plug this mesh to use in this new mesh here. And that's it. Now if we compile and save this and look here in the viewport, we should see this orange appearing right here in the middle. There you go. So now we have basic object spawning going on. But of course we don't want to spawn just one of them. We want to spawn a bunch of them over a period of time, right? So this is what we can do, right? Instead of calling this spawn here from begin play, we're going to create a custom event. We're going to call this spawn fruit. I also created these variables here, this extra variable current spawned, which says how many has been spawned until now. And it starts at 0, right? So we're just gonna say spawn fruit. When in begin play, we call spawn fruit. And then this is going to call this. But again, I don't want to spawn this in the center every time, right? So instead, we want to spawn each object in this area here. So what we can do is grab this spawn area. We can get component bounds, and now we can get this function called random point in bounding box, and then we grab origin here in center and box extent in here, and this is gonna get a random point in the world in that box. So we can just grab this and drag it and put it over here in the spawn location, and this should give us a fruit in every position, right? So let's try this and see what happens. So I got just one, right? Because I only called it once. I didn't even like put this in the right place actually. So we put this in here, remove this connection, and then after this, let's actually update this. Set current spawned, get current spawned, and then I'm going to add 1. So I'm saying another one was spawned, so I'm incrementing this value, right? And I want it to stop at 50. So I'm going to call again. Actually, I'm going to do a branch here. I'm going to check if current is less than max. And if it is, we'll spawn another one. If it is not, we'll stop. So here I'll just call spawn again. Spawn fruit. But actually, before we do this, we should add a delay here. We don't want them all to spawn at once, right? We'll add a delay of like 0.2. Let's do 0.2 and see how it goes. So every 0.2 seconds, another one spawned. I actually want this to be a lot faster, but we'll do that later. Nice. So now we have this fruit spawning, right? But now we want to make them different. Each time we spawn one, we want them to be different. A random selection of those fruits that I had. So in this mesh to use here, instead of selecting orange, we're gonna do a random selection, right? Create a function, get random fruit. And in here, let's see, how many do we have? We have 6 of them. The grenade is not gonna be in this selection. So we can add a select here. We set this to index, and then we want 6 options. So let's add some pins here. So let's get a random integer. So let's do 6. So exclusive max, so it's from 0 to 5, right? So we want to be able to select a static mesh from these selections. So we can right click into this pin, change spin type, and do static mesh. Then we can select here orange, banana. There we go, I set all of them. This output, I'm going to set this as a mesh and make it a static mesh object reference type. And now we can go in here in the event graph and drag this in here. Actually, can make this a pure function.
No.
And just drag this in here like this. And let's make this faster too. There you go. All random. Now this is a huge freaking apple. So we'll scale this down. Okay, so actually to scale this down, I decided to do something like this, right? Let's get scale here as an output variable. Then we can do a select, set it as float. We plug the same variable over here, and then we do one for all of them, except this apple here, which is number 2, option 2. So this one, let's see, 0.2. Let's see if this is a good value for scale. And then we can plug scale in here like this. And it didn't work at all. For some reason, this wasn't working when I set this to pure, so I removed this pure, and now I'm getting everything working correctly. Okay, so turns out I didn't understand pure functions at all. So I made a little example here just to explain what was going on. And by the way, I put a link in the description for a video that talks a lot about pure functions. If you're curious, you should take a look because it's really informative, man. But here's the short version. So you're gonna have a pure function like this. Each time you read one of these outputs, it calls the function again and basically generates a new random number again. So I made this little example here to show you. So this function just calls this random integer here, and I connected this output here to these 2 pins. And here in my main graph, I just call this once. I print 2 strings with each input. So when we run this, there you go, 2 different numbers. And the reason is when I call this print, it runs this function once, and then when I call it here, it runs it again. It gets a new number, and yeah, it fucks it all up. And that's what was happening with my fruit thing. It was getting a random mesh and then a random scale every time. Alright, back to the tutorial. Okay, now I'd like to make this fruit simulate physics. I want them to be thrown and then fall with gravity, right? If I select static mesh here and I look for simulate, it's gonna be grayed out. And I'm not sure why that is, but I figured out if I set a default mesh here, like the orange, even though it's gonna be changed later, just by doing this, it allows me to select this. So now these objects are simulating physics. So if I run this, we're gonna see them falling here. Alright, so the next thing I want to do is make this fruit be thrown in the direction of my head here. To do that, I need to add a force to them when they are created, right? So this is what I did here. I added this force max time and current force time in this fruit blueprint. What this does is force max time is the maximum time that the force is applied, and this is how long the force has been applied already. So basically, after the begin play, when the static mesh is created, I set this to 0, the current force time, and then right here in event tick, I add the delta seconds to current first time. So every time the game ticks, this current first time increases in time, right? And then the max time here, I set it to 0.1 seconds. Maybe I'll set to 0.5, half a second, maybe that's a little better. And then here, I created an event called add force to fruit that I call here in the begin play. Add force to fruit, right? So this is called when the fruit is created. And then I have these helper functions here. These are just some functions that some blueprints that I did to help me do a bunch of things easily. Like this, all this does is grab this actor from the world. So I get this actor here. I get the skeletal mesh component, which is this skeletal mesh, right? I get the bone transform for the spine 05, which is the neck. I get the world location for this, and I subtract this from the vector for the static mesh, which is the fruit, right? So what I'm doing here is getting a vector that goes from the fruit to the neck here. So this direction, right? And I use this as the force to be added to the fruit. Each tick. And then after doing this add force, which is the function that creates the force, the velocity and the speed, right? I test the time to see if I have applying this for long enough. And if I have, I'll stop. And if this is still less than this, then it creates this event here, which is add force to fruit. It basically just recursion calls this again over and over again, right? The reason I have this, and instead of just calling like at the end here, if I just called add force to fruit, right? I check the time, and if it's not ready, I call again, right? This doesn't work because basically I have to call this every tick of the game. But if I do this, it's gonna call like an infinite amount of times in between each tick, and it's gonna hang the engine. So basically I need to use this function, set timer for next tick by event, and what this does is only causes event when the next tick of the game happens, right? So if we test this, the fruit is being thrown in that direction, right? Let's do it again. But it's being thrown too weakly, so let's increase this force here by multiplying this by like 10, let's see. Multiply this by 10 like this. Okay, this is kind of a lot better, right? I can change this vector to point a little upwards so that it actually hit my head. Let's try to do that. So let's try to add. This is getting to be a mess. Let's add some Z here. So let's say, I don't know, 5. Barely made any difference. Let's do 100, I don't know. Let's try something huge. Okay, this is better, right? So this is basically what I want to happen, but not from here. I want this spawner, if I can click it. I want to drag this over here to be thrown like right in my face, right? And I can even bring this behind my wall here because there's no collision here. And the camera is going to be pointing this way, so the objects are all going to be thrown in this direction, right? And I actually want to change also this, this box. So I'm going to select this and change the scale here to be a lot larger like this. Bring this up. So let's see how this looks if I do this. Maybe now the Z is gonna be bad because you're gonna, like, I'll fly in this direction, so maybe this won't work, but we'll see. Yes, it's going right over my head, so let's make this 40. Let's try 40. Yeah, this is pretty good. Maybe the force is a little bit too strong now. I'll just tweak this for a little while until I get a result that I like. Okay, so I did some changes here. I made this a lot more thinner and shorter, but a lot wider, so that basically they are thrown in a little more predictable way and fall in the same place, but from like a larger angle difference on the sides here. Also the size, the scale of the objects was making them fly in different ways because of their mass. So I have to go over here and override their mass so all of them have the same mass, right? And for some reason, don't ask me why, the perfect number to get them to fly the way that I wanted was 0.67. So I don't know, that's like a divine number or something. I also increased the number of max fruits to like 100, and I set the delay to half. So now they're double the fruit in half the time. And this is kind of what it looks like when they are thrown. And there we go. Now here's the thing, I don't want this to start throwing all these fruits in begin play, right? In the start. So the spawner right here, this one. So here's begin play, right? And here's where I do this spawn fruit. I don't want this. I want a custom event, and I'll call this start throwing. And when this is called, I'll call this. So now when I play the level, nothing's gonna happen, right? I want this to start throwing when my animation calls it. So let's go back to my animation here that I was doing. The new level sequence, I'll call this Boo level sequence. Time to give it a name, I guess. Now when I open this sequence, it's in here that I want to call this event. So I'm going to grab this and drag it in here so I can call events of this blueprint in this level sequence, right? And here I'm going to click this and do a event trigger. Okay, so here in this event I'm going to click this, add a new key at the current time, and if I look over here, there's my event. It's kind of hard to see, but there's a little green thing here, see? So I'm going to right click this and go to properties endpoint. I'm going to create a new endpoint. And now I'm going to get this reference to my fruit spawning blueprint. I'm going to call start throwing. And now I want this blueprint because, like, okay, so if I play this level right now, nothing's gonna happen, right? In fact, let me get my tracking here. Okay, so I have my tracking working here, and I want to be able to start my animation right from this position, right? So let's do that. Alright, so this video has gone on for quite long enough already. So let's continue on in the next video. We're gonna talk a lot about animation blueprints and transitions and stuff. So see you then.